Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the tie-in. Today, we're speaking with Zsofia from Green Eyes, and they're a sustainability practitioner in film and entertainment in the UK and in Hungary and in Eastern Europe. Yeah, we're really looking forward to speaking with her.
Yeah, I've known her for a little while and I have interacted with her in a few different capacities over the years. And she always comes to this with a holistic view of sustainability. And so I'm curious to hear her experiences in the UK and in Eastern Europe and kind of dive into maybe the differences there. I think that's fascinating. And we're all coming at this, from a slightly different perspective, different regulations, culturally, all of
Mhm.
these things. So I'm curious to hear what she says there.
Yeah, it's totally like I'm in Amsterdam right now, and I've been learning a lot about the European film and sustainability industry. And it's interesting because there are so many jurisdictions and so many feature films in each different language in each area that they're not all talking to each other. So Sophia's lens is interesting because she comes from the major production and Hollywood sort of style productions, but there's tons of little countries that are happening. I heard today that 1,500 feature films that a year are shot in Europe. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's just something to consider, and there's lots of opportunities because not every country is at the same pace of I don't know, development and understanding of the sustainable production methods.
Yeah. A lot to keep up with, a lot to wrap our arms around, and a lot to kind of move forward. So excited for this
Mhm.
conversation. Let's dive in. Hi, Sophia. Great to have you on the tie-in. We are excited to finally talk with you. It's been a little while, so thanks for joining us.
Hi guys, thanks for having me here. I've been an admirer of the tie-in for a long time, so it's very nice to be here now.
Yeah, we're excited to have your sustainable production perspective and and your view through the consulting lens and your view through working with different organizations in this space. And so there's a lot to dive into, I think, in this conversation.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Sophia. And yeah, we're looking forward to diving in and getting your perspective and also what you're seeing in the field, especially from a European lens. I think
Yeah.
that's really exciting to see as I've been talking to folks here as well in the Netherlands this week. And we also love a good old-fashioned origin story. So if you can help us to give context to who you are, what you're doing now, and then also what got you into the field of sustainability and film and TV.
Oh wow. Well that will be long. How much time you've got? Uh, I'll try and make it short and succinct. But obviously we're storytellers, so it will have to have a bit of a story there. I'm Hungarian. I'm born and raised Hungarian, and then I moved to the UK, and now I'm British as well. Magic. It was always my dream to become British. I was enamored with Harry Potter, let's be honest, and Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and all the stories that I was reading. At the beginning, I just read everything, and then I discovered the moving image. I was a I was a kid who couldn't really wait for the next book when she liked something, so I started writing my version of them. Um, and then yeah, I found myself in the UK at age 18, and I lived in London and Beaconsfield back and forth for about 15 years, across the 15-year span. And I worked in the film industry. Always worked in the film industry, apart from two jobs when I worked in vegetarian restaurants. That was the beginning. And so in the film industry, I mainly worked in sales and exhibition. So I was a a glorified popcorn girl, and then I moved up. I was managing cinemas, then I worked in PR. So I was on the red carpet where I genuinely quickly discovered that the red carpet can be a very cold place. Uh, and I kind of prefer the more genuine side of things. Well, it was just not, I was really not cut out for that environment, I think. And so I did a lot of storytelling related jobs, festivals. I had my own festival, which was a sales and distribution summit, basically for filmmakers to try and teach them how to get their film to an audience, which was very successful. I went to great unis that I really enjoyed, and I crowdfunded one of them because it was hard to get in, and I was working full time already. So I crowdfunded my NFTS course, which was, I think, the first. I think quite a few people have done that since then, but I think I was the first to do that. And
Nice.
so I basically, thanks. I basically everything always went back to like storytelling and the love of film and how I really enjoyed like, looking at the creation of it from different perspectives. But it was through a lens of business as well to some degree, because you cannot sell a film or a TV series or a game unless you have an audience and you know who you're selling it to and how you're selling it. And I find that I actually find that very helpful in sustainability as well, because I think there's a lot of element of like who you're talking to, who your audience, how you convey the message, and what's your story within that as well. And to your question, Mark, how I actually ended up in sustainability. So I was working for a really great company during COVID. I had to move back, so I was working remotely. It was called BAFTA Rockcliffe. I was the development exec. We were quite a small production company, and during that time, I kind of realized that I think it's genuinely ridiculous. I've seen budgets, I know how to write them. I'm looking at, I'm pitching every week to different studios, but I've never been on a film set like on a big one. So what am I talking about? Like, what is it? I'm just sitting at this table and I'm like, criticizing the script or well, not criticizing, hopefully constructively criticizing and working together with the writer. But, I felt like I'm being a hypocrite if I've never been on a large set myself. And so I asked a producer who I knew back in Hungary, and she gave me a position. I was chaperoning the producers from New York. I was their assistant on The Hunt, which was an Amazon show. I learned so much. It was really exciting, and that opened my eyes to like the volume of how big a film set can be and what kind of train wreck of a ride it is when you start prepping everything, you start purchasing a lot of things, and then you go in with 100 miles, you shoot it, and you go out of it with 100 miles, and there's no stopping. And there's a lot of there's a lot of damage throughout if you think about it that way. A lot of casualties, which no one wants to get, but I felt like someone should take responsibility for. I think it's probably from my personality as well. Like my mum raised me that way. We've been vegetarian since I was born. Me and my sister, we never ate meat. For example, it was a lot about ahimsa, not killing anyone, taking care of your environment, and all of that. And so I was very happy when I found a way to marry these two things. And I've met my business partner on this show. It's Julia, who's by profession, she's a biologist and a science communicator. She studied science communication, so she's a science communicator, I guess. And we just bonded over this. We were like, she lived in Germany, I lived in the UK. We were like, well, compost is just a basic must-have. Let's do it. That was kind of like the discussion that we started having. And then loads of things happened. Basically, we started asking questions, we started educating ourselves simultaneously. This was quite funny. I went to a film finance lecture that Rosetta Canella was teaching on. She came to do a presentation. It was in London, organized by the Ladies in Film and Television group, which is my favorite group. And they started talking about sustainability and finance and storytelling. And I was like, oh, well, these are my favorite topics. How are they related? I never knew they can be related. So I started having thoughts about that quite a lot. And the funny thing is that Roselle was the international manager at the time at an organization called BAFTA Albert. Fast forward a few years, I got her job once she left. I didn't hold it onto it for too long, for various reasons, but it was a very funny, I thought like it's a very nice nod from the universe or whoever's out there that like I kind of like, got inspired by her in that position. And then I had a chance to actually have a better insight when I've taken on her mantle. So yeah, I really admire her work. It's pretty exciting. And basically, the origin story of Green Eyes is that Julia and I met on that show. We liked each other. We said we should do something. We started asking questions. And then one day we got an email from Marvel asking us if we want to do a show called Moonlight, which was at the time one of their biggest budgeted TV shows shooting in Budapest. And we were very transparent. We said, look, we wanna, but we've never done this. Like, are you okay with that, that we're going to learn it on the job? They were like, sure, we're okay with that. You're very enthusiastic. You really want to do it. We're like, okay, we'll do it. And that's how everything started. By the end of the production, we had Green Eyes, and here we are. I
Rest is
think
history.
later now. Rest is history.
And when
Yeah.
was that, by the way? That was like 2023,
No,
22.
no, I think it was 21.
Okay.
Okay.
During COVID.
Probably. I'm a little bit like hazy on that. It was at the height of COVID. There were a
Yeah.
lot of masks, there were a lot of tests. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard time for sure. For sure. Super interesting. I did not know that you came into this with that you had a production exec background. Like
Um,
I didn't realize that.
it's a small company.
That's
But
really interesting though. So
was a development exec. I was looking at the scripts, I was looking at the budgets, I was looking
okay.
at how to pitch them. Yeah, I still love it to this day. Like I really care about the story, and I think that's on that level, that's like the level where I'd like to connect to like all the producers when we start doing the trainings. Like we do a lot of discussions around budget lines and storytelling, green storytelling, and my big thing, which I think like every sustainability person's big thing, is basically that I'm here to make an amazing show or an amazing film. Like I only want to do what you want to do because I really love stories. I do want to make sure that while you're doing that, it is as like, environmentally friendly as possible. Because it would actually break my heart if my favorite shows were to be the biggest polluters, which sometimes they do because I like
Hmm.
sci-fi and you're inherently in that bracket of difficult. Large shows just have larger footprints.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned, and this is something we come up against all the time, but you mentioned, looking at budgets, knowing what they are, talking about what's in them. Um, how do you find now that you've got experience on set. You can see kind of now both sides of the coin, if you will, the sort of budget development side of it all, and then the execution side of it all. Um, how do you approach that conversation with folks now, when they're focused on the budget?
Well, head on. How else can
All right.
how else can you approach that? No, it's very difficult. I think there's a lot of lack of transparency, and it's not from an intention of like, oh, I want to hide something. I'm sure there's maybe bits of that as well, but traditionally, like, you segregate different things. Like everyone has their remit. and you're kind of protected of your own remit of like what you're looking at, how far the others like are allowed to look into that. And what I'm finding is what I try and advocate for from the onset is having a bit more transparency and having a holistic view. That's the other thing. It's very dependent on who you're talking to. Like if I'm talking to studios, my questions will be around their slate. Same with like bigger production companies. Because the question will be, or like my suggestion will be, please don't just look at one project. Look at your entire slate. Look in increments in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, because that's where you see like real changes and real savings. What we come across is even though a lot of people they actually they wanna adopt the sustainable option or something, their hands will be tied because it's a short production. You know, we're thinking in terms of months instead of years, and once you start thinking in years, then you'll have the big savings.
Hmm. Hmm. There's savings over time.
Yeah, and are
Yeah.
these you're mainly talking about films in the UK that are shooting all over Europe, or because
Yeah.
is there a difference between filming in the UK, which maybe have a little more advancement in this field versus I guess shooting in Hungary or somewhere else?
Yes, so there are a lot of differences.
Mhm.
It's quite exciting. I think both regions have a lot of advantages and disadvantages. So it's fairly obvious the UK is very advanced in technology, basically. So in terms of having clean tech suppliers, availability, they're really far down the road compared to Central Eastern Europe, where you genuinely try and reach out to every supplier, and I'm trying to create the demand myself by harassing everyone into like getting a battery pack or something, or going back to the same people over time, multiple times across the show to like see, there's a demand, I keep asking you, you need to get that next one. So in terms of technology, there's a lot of difference. And then there's a lot of difference in terms of regional legislations as well. But that can like differ around boroughs and councils in the UK as well. Like one borough will have this legislation and the other one will have a completely different one. So that's kind of a bit like, you need to learn and you need to work with each and one of them and kind of be on top of that. My some of my favorite legislations are around clear air zone legislations. So that's pretty good. That's something that's very helpful. You do find weird loopholes in there. So let's say there was one that we were talking to recently who said they've got this clear air zone rule, but it only relates to diesel and petrol cars. And so if it's like an engine six or like a Euro 6 or a Euro 4, and then we're like, okay, what about diesel generators? Like, can you bring in a stage three that's like horrible? Like, yeah, sure. Like, but you're banning you're banning Euro 4 cars, but you're allowing stage three Jennies. Yeah, so that's something where you can obviously carry on lobbying. They also had no reference to HVO, which was surprising to me. So, which is like a very clean alternative fuel that we can switch diesel out for. So some of these things are different in the UK or Central Eastern Europe. However, if you think about Central Eastern Europe in a way that Central Eastern Europe is a service hub, like the UK will be servicing the US, but the UK will also be independent on their own to
Hmm.
some degree. They've got a lot of revenue coming in from the film industry. Central Eastern Europe is way more dependent on their service jobs. It's actually a fun fact. I think the UK and the US numbers were really down if you're looking at the PACT reports and things like that. It was actually really, really hard for a lot of people in the industry. Like we saw a really big dip in our commissions as well. But if you're looking at Hungary, interestingly, I was looking at it and they might have their best year. I'm like, what? We didn't see any. We didn't see much of that. But basically, service countries differ in a way that you're trying to please who you're servicing.
Yep.
So in Budapest, in Prague, we will be, to some degree, we will be followers of like what the big jobs are requiring us to do. That's why the studios, the streamers who come here have a very large responsibility in terms of what they're asking. But most Central Eastern European countries have started taking steps on their own. So that's really exciting. That was a Czech announcement recently, which I recommend everyone to check out. uh, Pun intended. Um, and Central Eastern Europe, I think, is famously really good for a more circular way of thinking, if you think about it, because of the restrictions on budgets and whatnot. You wanna kind of make your money go a long way. And so you use a lot of prop houses, you use a lot of secondhand flea markets and circularity approach. That said, IP is a big issue for all of us in the UK, whether you're in the UK or in Budapest. So IP and donation still has to be ironed out. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. So there is this maybe cultural and mindset difference as well, in addition to the availability of equipment
Yeah.
in different regions. Um it it's interesting. So do you find that the topic, since you mentioned it, the topic of circularity, is it um as prevalent or popular or incorporated into the culture in the UK as the focus on maybe clean tech, or not? It sounds like it's maybe more of a focus in Eastern Europe because of the nature of the culture and the budgets and just kind of the mindset, as opposed to actually having the physical equipment there to focus on the clean tech.
Well, I don't wanna generalize. I think there's a lot of great initiatives in the UK as well now for circularity. Somehow it felt like it was always easier to like get hundreds of options there. Just buy it. Just make sure you
Mm.
have it in case one of the creative decides to have this. You just have to line up all the options. You just have to, and I mean that for physical material, for location, for anything that can come into the to this. So you just have to have options.
Mhm.
And that kind of creates a lot of waste or a lot of surplus. Waste can, mean additional working hours. More people working for longer hours, they're using more energy, they're eating more, your carbon footprint is increasing. I think in Central Eastern Europe, they're naturally trying to be a bit more resourceful with that. But most of the time, if I can just boil it down to this, like sustainability is basically sometimes it's just common sense. Sometimes it's going back to what we're doing a couple of decades ago before we started producing everything in China and it became discardable. Like a lot of people, like if I'm trying to explain circularity to my grandparents, they'll be laughing at me and they'll be like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we lived during the war. This is how we were doing everything. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? You're weird that you're discarding everything. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
I know. So I'm
Yeah.
not discovering uh something new here. I'm going back to the old roots.
Right, right. Where there was more of a sense of resourcefulness, as you said, as opposed to this maybe this idea or living in this world of abundance where we're just like it's
It's
just
like
all
one and
around
done,
all the time.
like one and done, that
Yeah.
mentality.
That was
Yeah.
a really cool one. I think I don't know in which country I read that. Sometimes these things get confused in my head, but there was a at a time when they were delivering flour and wheat in textile bags, the company realized it's usually the housewives who are buying it, but they don't tend to have enough money to purchase a lot of clothing and things like that. So they made special printing and special painted like pictures on the flour sacks. And so the housewives kept those once they were empty and made clothes out of them. So that was a cool one.
That's fun. That's fun.
That's great. Are you also dealing with sort of set design folks? Like, are you dealing with all the departments right now and they're very open to that, or is it, are
Yeah.
you still limited to a few departments? So you're covering the whole entire span of the production.
Yeah, we cover everything. It changed a lot since we started working. I can see that the industry developed so much. At the beginning, we were like brought in to tick boxes a few weeks before production or principal photography, which was I'm not saying it was useless. I'm not saying that at all because it was really useful from a perspective of learning what was happening, what didn't go well, and collecting data. But from like a decarbonization, mitigation, prevention perspective, there was not enough lead-in time. Now we have more lead-in time. We start getting like we're engaging companies sometimes even when they don't have a job. So or like a production, that's when we engage them for their sustainability, like overall sustainability strategy of like what they can do. And then next step is like a green light stage. You start training up your key decision makers to start having sustainability at the back of their mind because they will be making the biggest decisions that they don't need me there to like hold their hands, but they will be deciding which country you're shooting in, how you're getting to that country, what type of equipment you're transporting, how many crew members you've got, how many local crew members you've got, how many sets are you building. That's when you're looking at your scripts as well, and obviously making those plans location wise, set wise, and all of that. And we tend to come in at that stage now. We're doing more and more script analysis as well from a sustainability point of view when we're looking at either the storytelling or the relationship of between like how you're gonna shoot it and how you can, reduce your carbon footprint. So kind of estimating like a draft footprint at the beginning. And once you're on production, you engage every department. Okay, maybe, okay, who do I not engage with? I mean, maybe I don't talk too much to sound because they like once I convince them to use rechargeable batteries, then as much as I love them, one of my really good friends, she works in the sound department, but we don't have that much to talk about afterwards in terms of sustainability. They tend to have their kit, they use their
Mhm.
rechargeable batteries and all good. But our department, production, design, construction, oh yeah,
Wardrobe.
costume,
Yeah.
wardrobe, yeah, wardrobe for you guys, costume. Loads, especially when you're either doing historical, sci-fi or fantasy, and there's a lot of custom made materials, dyeing, ironing, and then cutting, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot you can do. What I'm always saying is that actually I genuinely love this. Like the department heads. They're the experts, the coordinators, the department heads. They know so much about this. We're just trying to facilitate and give them free, like space and agency to do that. We're hearing them out and we'll be fighting on their behalf to try and get the more sustainable options for them. So that, yeah. Once
Yeah.
they realize that we're not there to police and restrict anyone, but we're there to fight on everyone's behalf to kind of make their department greener and more livable, then I think collaboration can be very handy. We do tend to engage mostly with location and unit. We talk quite a lot with the best boy and the gaffer in terms of electricity. Production's obviously like our main point of contact in terms of everything. Transport is a big deal. We're getting a lot of data from them in terms of mileage, unit cars, fleets, shuttles, everything. Travel and accommodation, big deal. Who am I missing? Art department, costume we talked about.
Catering? Did you say catering?
Catering, yes. And accounts.
Yeah.
Accounts is good. Yeah, they have to be a good friend because accounts will be tagging everything, obviously, that goes through the books. and we get weekly reports from them where we check if they used, like, on our diesel-free shows, for example, we will be checking for if they used any diesel, if they purchased any PET bottles, if there's anything that, like just comes out of the report like strikingly, it shouldn't be like that, or we'll question it, or we'll try and there's never any telling off element of this, so we're not the police. I'm saying this twice
Yes, you
because
are. Let's just,
Mhm.
stress that one.
we've got that before, so I'm just trying to make that clear. We're not clearly a
Mhm.
painful past there. Um, so yeah, I actually like discovering mistakes, not because then you can pinpoint blame or anything, that'd be very stupid, but because you can learn from that mistake and you can bring it out in the open and you can figure out how to do it better next time. So in a constructive way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find, I assume, so tell me if I'm wrong. Have you worked with the same crew, on multiple shows, like seen them and worked with them? Have you found that their confidence in sustainability and it has grown kind of over time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sometimes like get calls from crew members who we worked with. They'll be on a different show but they haven't engaged us. And the crew member will be like, so I'm out here and there are no bins. Where are you
Mhm.
guys? Well, not everyone pays for our services. Also, we don't just do bins, but from a
Yeah.
crew's perspective, it's very hard to like that's the first point of contact. That's the touch base point where they actually see what's happening and they believe you what's happening behind the curtain as well. Because maybe my carbon footprint actually mainly consists of electricity and utilities if I'm shooting at a studio. And I will be communicating that to the crew that, like, let's say we have green electricity. It's not that obvious what kind of electricity, like what powers your lamp. But it's very obvious if you mess up your bins, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why
You, you
there's a big
meant
focus.
you mentioned transportation. So are you starting to see EVs now? You mentioned HVO. That's a European term for some sort of a diesel alternative. Um, the yeah, so are you seeing sort of any sort of solar powers on the crew on the trailers and so on?
Oh.
Because we're starting to see that here in North America quite a bit. But I don't know if they're starting to take hold there.
Do you guys not have a HVO in the US? You call it differently?
We call it renewable diesel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's the
So,
same thing. It's hydro treated vegetable oil. Oh,
yeah.
sorry, tongue
Yeah.
twister. Part two.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, actually, so we've got two shows on which we're trying to be diesel free. So I think those are two really good examples to demonstrate these. One is a studio-based one, one is a location-based one. And when we set the goal to be diesel free, we kind of had an approach, three steps. So step number, that's four steps now. Step number one is kind of assessing where we think all electricity, fuel, everything will come from. To kind of like, get your baseline. Step number two is try and reduce everything. So we had the DP on the power plan calls, we had, unit managers and everyone put their 2 cents together and tried to figure out, okay, so this is going to be a problematic area. We're not going to be able to tie into the grid here. Let's have a look at these 2 weeks that are like, a big issue. This one will be sorted out. And, everyone was pitching in. So step number two was reduction. Then step number three was once you've reduced it as much as you can, you bring in your clean tech. Let's switch out your old tech
Mhm.
and let's use your clean tech. And by clean tech, and Mark, you will be very familiar
Mhm.
with these ones. We use a lot of different kind of hybrid setups, battery setups from small to large, everything. So from the 2 kilowatt teeny tiny portable ones. We will have the 2Ks, the 5Ks, then you go up to 20Ks, 40Ks. The 40K, you will be um, attaching it to a generator. So you're turning it into a hybrid.
Mhm.
Then you go even higher up. And so on these two shows, we have various setups. So catering has a hybrid that's powering it. Unit base is powered from a hybrid. Lighting, we did manage to actually use hybrids there too. That was one of the biggest challenges around that because often there were mobility issues around. Like, so one particular one was, for example, you you would have had to fit your battery on a Range Rover because it was that kind of a specific location. And the Range Rover Jenny was kind of like a thing that they already had custom made and they use it quite a lot. But then we were trying to like, get the battery fitted on it, and from a health and safety perspective and like weights and stuff, it wasn't a whole ordained. So sometimes dealing with lighting can be challenging as well, and that's why the previous step of reduction actually matters quite a lot. Because when your DP is on board, they will be thinking about this and they will be doing testings ahead, and not every light you just can't switch out every light to
Yeah.
LED. Like, there are tungstens and HMIs you have to use, and I'm very respectful of this because my boyfriend is a gaffer, so we talk about these things
Mhm.
constantly at home. And as much as he likes clean tech, he's obviously protecting his corner of like, there has to be the creative aspects as well. So there are funny debates happening over a glass of wine. So yeah, so sorry. Step
Mhm.
number three was clean tech. And yes, we're seeing a lot. We're seeing a lot of clean tech, mainly in the UK,
Mhm.
more solar powered honey wagons. Do you call
Yep.
them honey wagons?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Toilets
Uh-huh.
for everyone else who's listening. So yeah, we see more and more. I think there's a market gap there for larger ones because the solar powered ones tend to be quite small, and sometimes we need the 4x4 large ones, and they just don't come in that. Um, I haven't tried some of the very fancy new tech, which I know some of my fellow consultants have, and it's really exciting. So we haven't tried hydrogen yet. I'm
Mhm.
really looking forward to that. I know quite a few really large shows are using it. It obviously has its challenges around mobility as well. And then this is the stage when it comes like logistics comes into it as well. So not just clean tech, but logistics. So let's say we're gonna try and have a look at the unit base to try and keep it as close to location as possible to reduce like travel distances basically for crew. We try and limit the number of unit moves when it's not necessary because it's actually quite substantial when you're trying to move 60 trucks, all filled with fuel. And this is where we start looking at trying to tie into the grid, which I know in Canada is very cool, and you guys have a whole map and you've got a lot of
Mhm.
points in the city where you can do that. We don't tend to have that yet. It's quite a big fight. You're trying to get either a temporary connection or a permanent connection. We're fighting more and more for permanent connections. They can be so-called legacy projects, where a legacy project is kind of like an insetting project where you leave something for the community behind, that the community will benefit from it as well, and others will benefit. And based on the Canadian model, they actually built a grid cabinet in Victoria Park, which is one of
Our
the most,
kiosks. That's what they call them
yeah,
in Vancouver.
you call them kiosks?
We call them
Grid,
kiosks.
power
Yeah.
Oh,
kiosk. Grid
yeah.
cabinet. Grid cabinet's good too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Grid
we've
cabinet.
got a great kiosk in Victoria Park now. It's quite nice. We used it on one of our shows. It was brilliant. So
Yeah.
thanks God, there were a lot of stakeholders working on it for years to kind of
Mhm.
get that off the ground, and hopefully there will be some more. So this is that stage, and the final stage of it is step number four when there's just nothing left. You can't switch your machinery to electric because it doesn't come in that size. That's the stage when your manufacturer doesn't refuse HVO, because that's the final stage when we're actually switching everything to HVO. So we're not putting diesel in, but we're putting HVO.
Right. Because
Yeah,
HVO is a drop-in fuel, and you can put
yeah,
it in an existing diesel generator to swap out
exactly.
normal fossil fuel diesel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are those steps that I'm not counting when the manufacturer will just refuse
Mhm.
HVO, even though it's okay to use.
Yeah.
They'll just use it, and those are some of your learning curve moments when
That's right. That's
take note of
right.
that. You'll put them on your blacklist of like, he's refusing to put HVO. I'm not going to use him on the next show.
Mhm.
Yeah, they go in a list, all suppliers, think about this and
Yeah.
switch to HVO. And yeah, finally we just collect data. We
Yeah.
religiously look at telemetrics, live telemetrics. We use different kind of distro boxes that are measuring the output of each line, which is absolutely insane. So yeah, there's a lot of information coming in
Hmm.
that you have to digest. But then you can really you can you can figure out some really great savings, and just it's just better for everyone if you're not using either too much electricity or you're not wasting too much fuel. Like everyone benefits from that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about efficiency. So what are the common questions that you are asked then, either prior, pre-planning or during the production or even post?
How much is going to cost me?
Yeah, that's a classic one.
It's like number one.
To which a friend of mine has a really good thing to say, which is you shouldn't care about your green premium because you're taking a dirty discount. So that's what you're taking.
Yeah.
Hmm.
One of my favorites is, well, should we spend the money and shoot clean, or should we spend the same money and shoot dirty?
There you go.
Or
That's the
what
main
I
thing.
like is trading in dirty OpEx for clean CapEx,
Ooh, that's fancy.
right? Well, it's more on the generator side, right? Because you're not spending money on fuel, you've got different savings, but you're get that little bit of an extra cost on the clean tech. So,
Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, all the hybrid ones, they came quite a long way now.
Hmm.
And so, like, I don't know, 4 years ago when we first looked at it, was clearly like costly. It's still costly, but now that we're looking at all the savings and everything, we do actually see that on the location show where we would have been using a lot of fuel, but we have a lot of hybrids. We actually have savings, like we're in the positive end of those things. But what people tend to be worried about or don't foresee, and that's why it's like, it's a little bit still the inexperience around these technologies, and is that there's going to be an upfront cost at the beginning. It's unavoidable. It's gonna cost you more. There are more equipment out there. You have to rent that out. But at the tail end, you will see some savings. However, it's always really hard to get everything approved at the beginning.
Hmm.
And by the end of it, people tend to run out of fume and they almost like they don't even care, but by then you have savings. So it's a bit of a hard sell that, like, you spend more here, you'll have some savings at the end. And sometimes I feel like people just don't want to look ahead to the
Hmm.
month and the next month because they only care about probably. Okay, so if I want to be fair, it's quite important from a cash flow perspective. You do want to think about your bottleneck and your crunch points. So it is an issue if it costs more at some point than the other equipment. But then that's where we need, I don't know. external support, levies, incentives, funds, policies, regulations, everything. We need all of that.
No, I know. I mean, these kinds of conversations are happening. I mean, we talk to different people around the world. Like I I find very similar conversations are happening in different filming jurisdictions around the world. So it sounds like we're all kind of coalescing around some similar ideas.
Absolutely. And I can guarantee we're probably working with the same people as well, because there's a handful of people who work in this industry and who passionately care about it. Yeah, but one of my really big, I don't know, bane of life or what's the word? There's a nicer word for that. Something I really care about basically is the tax incentives. And it's pretty exciting that we're seeing more, well, I'm hearing more rumors around soon to be announced tax incentives that are tied to sustainability. And my other big thing is that I'm hoping that cultural tests will also start like taking sustainability into account. So when you try and get more money for like shooting in a country, then if you tie it to the te cultural test, you should consider sustainability as well. So I tend to ramble on and on about this on LinkedIn a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And one of the interesting things that I find is that if you think about what tax incentives really are, it's government funding for, it's a government program, a government incentive. You're giving the production a an opportunity to pay fewer taxes, if you will. And
Exactly.
and that's a subsidy for this particular industry. And my question is usually, is the government also, so what other industries is the government subsidizing? And why are we, like, is it fair? Is it appropriate? Does this industry give back more locally, economically? Like, or does it sound great? Like what are those financial instruments behind the scenes that are influencing this?
Sure. I think it's a very complex question,
Hmm.
and for me, who's from two regions and two countries, if I'm thinking with my Hungarian hat on or with my Hungarian heart, for us, it's actually our livelihood. It's everything. Like if there are no US productions, like during the beginning of when the Ukrainian war broke out, there was a bit of a halt in the productions coming. Like a lot of people are dependent on these shows to come in. You
Yeah.
have jobs. It doesn't mean too much for like others because we're a small country. I think it's about 20,000 people who directly engaged in a freelance position on shows. But then what about the indirect ones, the suppliers, or the companies like who built upon this entire industry? Because obviously this industry has a lot of different arms and legs everywhere from catering to facilities to a lot of different ones. And so that's a very important one. But if I'm trying to put my sustainability hat on that doesn't have a country where it's from, then I'll be like, okay, so here's this tax incentive encouraging really large productions to travel across the world. We're giving them money for it to hop on a flight and get here and then burn a lot of diesel. How's that helping? So, I'm
Totally. And with direct funding from governments or government organizations that fund, like, local domestic projects, for example, that money is coming from the taxpayer as well. And if the government has a climate action plan in place at the federal level, for example, all funding coming through the government for government operations or projects or whatever they're spending money on should be in line with their climate action plan, right?
yeah,
That's my thinking anyway.
it
And
should.
taxpayers should not be paying for productions to come in and essentially like, pollute. No, no industry, not just,
Yeah.
film and TV, but
Or
any
come
industry
in.
receiving
Yeah.
government
Or
money.
come in,
Yeah.
but don't pollute.
Yeah,
And
exactly, right? Like we're
function.
not going to pay you to do that.
Yeah. But like, that's why. So for example, I can recommend the study that came out. It's written by Hunter Vaughan and Pietro Kappa, and we were contributing to it with some amazing people. And basically we were trying to examine the financial situation behind sustainability and what motivates it and the policies around it. And so the three pillars they have to coexist in order to really move forward our industry, according to us, basically, according to us, is one, you need a baseline. Like, unless you have a baseline and some minimum standard of requirements, then it's gonna be very hard to go anywhere. And that baseline should take into consideration your regional specifics, because it's not okay to demand something from one country and then the other that have really big gaps between them. It's about the question of like equity and equality. Like, we're not starting from the same position in every country. So you need to have a baseline according to your baseline, basically. Step number two, and I'm a firm believer of this, I do think at this point we still need incentives. And maybe that will be a time when it changes and you no longer need to bribe producers, production
Mhm.
companies, whoever. But we're not at that point yet. We need to incentivize. Um, Productions to actually be more ambitious, achieve more, and kind of enable them as well. Because without support, we can't create the demand between like amongst the suppliers who actually have to invest quite a lot in changing their ways. And three is auditing, because a lot of the things that we're doing is based on self-admittance and data. And although I vouch for my character, um, I'm not sure, that's enough everywhere. I feel like there should be an independent third party approving system, just to like, I don't know, realize the mistakes, improve on your processes, what you can do better, keep you on your toes or something. Or just like sometimes it's just good to like have someone like another organization or allies where you can bounce off ideas from. It can be a very lonely job to do these things, especially in sustainability. It can be very disheartening as well sometimes. So it's really good to have an external view on these
Mhm.
things.
As you've probably heard on our podcast, we love to ask this sort of final question. Um, we're creating this playbook, right? For this, all these ideas. Everybody's telling us, sharing us these amazing stories. So if you were to create a new playbook, right, with guiding principles around sustainability and entertainment, what would be your first on your list or top two that you would suggest that we add?
It's hard. I've been thinking about this,
Hmm.
obviously, because you're gonna ask me.
Yeah.
Maybe my favorite one this year. I change my advice every year
Mhm.
as I'm learning more. My favorite one this year is around your leverage point. I think that everyone has their own leverage point, and it's really important to find your leverage point within
Mhm.
sustainability. And we're making a lot of decisions every day. Someone might be making a decision around which bin liner to buy. Meanwhile, someone else will make a decision on like which country to take 300 crew members. Find your own
Mhm.
leverage point and consider sustainability from that perspective. You might not be always able to choose the more sustainable option that's like on paper is more sustainable, but it's all about adaptation and shifting as well. And I think you're in a good position once you consider sustainability. And my second thing, which I deeply care about, as I told you, is storytelling.
Mhm.
So I'll probably ask you to like, you know, be very creative with this, play with this, open your mind. It's not a restriction. it's the reality around us. And some of my most amazing favorite shows are considering sustainability and climate change in ways you'd never even thought about before. I'll give you a recent example. I just watched I just finished watching his Dark Materials. To me, it's so much about sustainability and our relationship with nature and all of that. Or I could have said peripheral as well, or even foundation, or a lot of these big shows, they consider sustainability in so many different ways. There's no right or wrong way. You can consider it like in a small way with an EV car, but you can consider it with a sweeping statement. I mean, if you haven't seen Extrapolation, go and watch Extrapolation. It's brilliant. That would be it.
Yeah, creative touch point for
Yeah,
sure. For
love it.
sure. Thank you so much for this
Um,
conversation and for sharing your perspective with us. We really, really appreciate it. Yay! I love talking with Sophia.
Mhm.
She's so just down to earth and enthusiastic and just a lovely person. I love her experience coming from the sort of development side of it all and then
Yeah.
kind of now in production, executing on some of these sustainable practices and engaging with crew and giving them agency. I think that's so important. I'm glad she's doing
Yeah.
it.
We hear that quite a bit as a theme too, because she knows exactly all the different parts of the production. She's worked in it. She knows how to communicate to the production folks but is bringing her own, enthusiasm and angle to it. I think that's really important.
Mhm.
Especially when she's jumping between countries.
I know there's a lot to keep up with there, and they're doing a great job. And it just goes to show, like, sustainability practitioners, say that one fast a few
Hmm.
times, are just really helpful, really important, helps to get the crew galvanized, helps to get, the data together, all of the stuff. So, um, it's great to build a body of knowledge around this and to have a team who goes out and works with folks and to understand your local country regulations and culture and all the stuff.
And
So,
vendors. And
and
vendors. I mean, that's
vendors,
that's a big part of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I love
So
when she said, she was calling the vendors every week or the
she's
next time.
creating the demand.
Yeah, because I remember, in the early days of portable electric, it's like someone said to me, like, well, look, unless we get 20 calls a week, we're not going to order it. We're not going to stock it or something to that extent, right? But I was like, oh, okay. So I got to
Yeah,
go drum up the demand.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
same, she's doing
That's
it.
that's what she's doing. So, to everyone out there who's, in a similar role, keep it up. We got this. And
Yeah.
definitely check out Green Eyes. They're doing some great work out there and look for them on LinkedIn and other social media. And if you guys know of anyone we should be talking to
Hmm.
who are doing great work behind the scenes, do get in touch. We are always up for a conversation.
Absolutely. And feel free to check out our past interviews. We've got a good body of interviews, all types, spanning all types of different conversations. And check us out on www.tieinpodcast.com. That's TIEIN podcast.com.
Yeah. See you soon. Hello, entertainment industry. Something I've been working on over the past year with partners U.S. Green Building Council California and Aerith Environmental is the development of the Sustainable Production for Entertainment Certification, or SPEC, as we like to call it.
It's the first certification for the entertainment workforce, and it's now live for folks to sign up.
Yeah, go to the U.S. Green Building Council California website at usgbc-ca.org to learn more about it and to register for an upcoming class. This is a great way to up your sustainability game and gain a professional certification. So this is for you. See you in class. Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.